Okay, let's have a look at this test 3 solutions. All right, so we want to form that indicated operations. Okay, so we're going to have this. Just get that into focus a bit better. Okay, find a pen that works. Okay, so we're just going to distribute that through. So negative 10 times 8 is negative 80. X squared times x is x cubed. And negative 10 times negative 12 is 120. And then times x squared. So I'm looking for the one that matches that. And I'm going to have that. Okay, now the next one, we want to multiply those using the FOIL method. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so x times x is x squared, and x times 9y is 9xy. Then 8y times x is 8xy. And 8y times 9y, well, 8 times 9 is 72, and y times y is y squared. And then we can combine those together. 9 and 8 is 17. So that's what I'm looking for. So x squared plus 17xy, then plus 72y squared. And that appears to be the one. Okay. All right, now find that product. Okay. Well, we want w minus 15 squared, which is not w squared minus 15 squared. It's w minus 15 times w minus 15. So again, I'm going to FOIL. So w squared minus 15w, then minus 15w again, then negative 15 times negative 15, which is going to be positive 15 squared, which is going to be plus 225. And so those together is going to give me negative 30w. Okay, so that's the one I'm looking for. Okay, that's matching that one. Okay. Add or subtract as indicated. Okay. With that first one, usually you'll just see it to where it's a negative sign by itself out the front. Okay. So we're going to multiply every term inside that first set of parentheses by a negative number, just negative 1. And then we have a plus symbol, and so nothing will change. We can drop those parentheses. So plus negative 5x squared, plus negative x, and plus positive 5. Okay. And now let's put these together. Negative x squared minus 5x squared is going to be negative 6x squared. And negative 7x minus x is negative 8x. And negative 1 plus 5 is positive 4. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. And it appears to be that one. Okay. All right, add or subtract as indicated. Express the answer as a single polynomial in standard form. Okay. All right, let's get this up here. Okay. This is where we're at. I'm going to multiply 7 through the first set of parentheses. I'll get a better pen. 7 minus 7 times y cubed plus, then I want to multiply 5 through the first set of parentheses. Plus 5y cubed. Okay, and then combine. So we're going to start with the largest power of y. Negative 7 plus 5 is negative 2, so I'm going to have negative 2y cubed. Then I'm going to get my y squared terms. There appears to be only one of them. And plus 5y. And then 7 plus 5 is 12. Okay. And be very careful because it's very subtle. Make sure all those symbols are correct. So it looks like that one's going to be the correct one. Okay. Now we want to factor out the greatest common factors. Okay, so let me get a pen and write this down first. Okay, so we need to look at the numbers. What do 12, 20, and 16 have in common? The most they have in common is a 4. So we can factor out a 4. And I'm going to do that first. So what are you left with if you factor out a 4? Well, we're going to be left with 3wx minus 5wy minus 4wz. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to look for is with the letters, and I can factor out a w. So that's going to go out the front. So when I factor the w out, I'm going to get that. Then with the terms that are left, it doesn't appear like I have anything else in common inside here. So that's as far as I can take it. So that's what I'm going to say my answer is. Okay. And so that's matching with that one there. All right, now with this one, we're going to try and use the trick. Are there two numbers? When you multiply them together, you get 6, but when you add them up together, you get 7. And yes, 6 and 1. 6 times 1 is 6, and 6 plus 1 is 7. So I have found a way to factor it. So this one will factor. And it didn't say what order to put it in. Okay, so I'm just going to put it in there. Now, we don't want to use any extra spaces. I know it didn't say to do that. So I did have to go back and check to see if anyone got counted wrong for putting in extra spaces. But you don't want to put in any extra spaces. Okay. Factor that trinomial. Well, we want to use the same trick if we can, because it starts with x squared. Are there two numbers that multiply together to give you positive 1, but add up together to give you negative 2? And yes, there are. Negative 1 and negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1, and negative 1 plus negative 1 is negative 2. So this is a correct factorization of it. You could have combined those. If you're going to write that like you do in web work, it would have to be like that. But this is what we were looking for, but that would have been correct. Okay. So it's always a bit fussy when you're having to write answers in. So 1 is a repeated 0 here. Now we come to this one. You cannot use the simple trick for this one. Okay, and I can see they don't have anything in common that you can factor out. All right, so 6z squared plus 5z minus 6. Now, what are the factors of 6? We could have 1 and 6, or we could have 2 and 3. Okay, and the order doesn't matter. Now, we have a negative symbol here. Okay, how could we get negative 6? Now, we're going to have to look at every possible order. We could have negative 2 and positive 3. We could have positive 3 and negative 2. We could have 2 and negative 3. We could have negative 3 and positive 2. Or we could have 1 and negative 6. Negative 1 and positive 6. Or the order could be reversed. I don't want to write them all down. Now, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a pairing where the outer product plus the inner product is going to equal positive 5. So I'm going to have 3 minus 12. That does not equal to positive 5. So this pairing won't work. Negative 2 plus 18. It's going to be 16. That doesn't equal 5. That pairing doesn't work. Negative 3 plus 12. That's not going to work. 2 minus 18. That's not going to work. Okay. Negative 6 plus 6 will be 0. That doesn't work. And 6 minus 6. That's not going to work. Okay. I don't think that's going to be the first one. Let's see what happens with these. 6 minus 6 is 0, and that's not going to work. Negative 4 plus 9 is 5. I found a pairing that works. So when you find a pairing that works, so 2, 3, and 3, negative 2, you can factor it. And I'm going to have 2z there, and 3z there, and plus 3, and minus 2. And you can FOIL it to make sure it works. I'm going to have, so checking, 6z squared minus 4z plus 9z, and then minus 6. Okay, so this is the factorization that I need. So I'm going to have 2z plus 3 close parentheses times 3z minus 2. Okay. Factor this one by grouping. Okay. Do that. So I'm going to write that. Okay. Let me move that up. Okay. All right. So if I'm going to group these, I'm going to put them together like that. These have an x in common, so I'm going to factor it out. These have a 7 in common, so I'm going to factor that out. Now, when I factor out a 7 here, I'm going to be left with 2x, and when I factor out a 7 there. Okay. Now, These have 2x plus 7 in common. And what goes in here? X plus 7. So the order doesn't really matter. You could have written it the other way, but you can factor this as x plus 7 times 2x plus 7. No spaces. Okay. Factor the polynomial by grouping. Okay. Now that one's a bit tricky. Okay. I'm going to group these into here. I'm going to start with this one because its leading term is negative. Okay. Now, what do 24 and 18 have in common? 18 is 6 times 3 and 24 is 6 times 4. So I'm not going to pull out a 6. I'm actually going to pull out a negative 6. So if the leading term is a negative number, pull out the negative. So what am I left with in here? Well, what's this divided by negative 6? That's going to be 4, positive 4, x. And if I pull out a negative 6 here, that's going to be minus 3. Okay. And now what about these two? 20 and 15 have 5 in common, and there's an x in common. So if I divide this by 5x, 20 divided by 5 is 4. And if I remove one of those x, I get x. And if I divide this by 5x, well, the x's cancel, and negative 15 divided by 5 is minus 3. Okay. So I am getting a common factor here of 4x minus 3. And what goes in there? 5x minus 6. Okay. You didn't have to do that second term first. Okay, you could have done this one first. And notice that the numbers have a 5 in common and the letters have an x in common. And then divide each term by 5x to get what goes inside here. And so 20 divided by 5 is 4. One of the x's is gone, then minus 3. But when you come here, if the leading term is negative, you have to pull out or factor out the negative. So the most 24 and 18 have in common is a 6, but because that leads with a negative, you're going to have to pull out the negative. And so what's left? Well, divide each term by negative 6. So the negative signs cancel, and you're left with 4x. And 18 divided by negative 6 is negative 3. So we're going to need 5x minus 6 times 4x minus 3. Okay. All right, factor by grouping. All right, still with factoring by grouping. Okay. Let's go to that. Okay, if I'm going to factor it by grouping, then I'm going to pair these up. What does this first pair have in common? They have an A, so I'm going to factor it out. What do these second pair have in common? They have a W, so I'm going to factor it out. And now what do these have in common? They have an S plus T in common. And so what goes in here? A plus W. So that's going to be my answer. So no spaces, A plus W times S plus T. by grouping. Okay, this time it's written with an R. So we've got 36r squared plus 45ry minus 4xr minus 5xy. Okay. Put these two together and those two together. Okay. 36 and 45. Well, 36 is 6 by 6, but 45 doesn't have that in there. So 45 is 9 times 5. 36 is 9 times 4. So I'm going to take out a 9, and I'm going to take out an r. So what's left when you factor out a 9 times r? Okay, well, 36 divided by 9 is 4. And if I remove one of the r's, I have r left over. 45 divided by 9 is 5. And if I remove the r's, they're gone, and I have a y. Okay. Now, these both have in common an x, but the leading term is negative. So we're going to remove a negative x. Okay. So I'm going to remove a negative x from there and a negative x from there. So what's going to be in here? The negative signs cancel, the x's go, and I'm left with 4r. And what's going to go in here? The negative signs cancel, the x's cancel, and I'm left with plus 5y. Okay, now these have that in common. And so what goes in here? Well, 9r and minus x. And so that's going to be my answer. So 9r minus x, no spaces, times 4r plus 5y. Close parentheses. Okay. Factor this polynomial completely. Okay, so what I'm actually seeing here is a difference of squares, but we just need to write it differently, write it into the form that we can use. So, now we have a rule for difference of squares. If you have that, you can write that like this. Okay. So 25 is a perfect square. It's 5 square. So let's get this rewritten. And 36 is 6 squared. Not quite there yet. I can put these together. Okay. Now I have a difference of 2 squares. So I might just want to write that. Because if I have that in parentheses, then that's the same as 5 squared times x squared. So I can use this rule. It will be this minus this times this plus this. Okay. And the order doesn't matter. So the positive one could have come first. It doesn't matter there. Okay, so let's see what they've got. Okay. All right, so they're going with this order. So there's the answer. Okay. Factor that completely. Okay. The first thing we need to do is look for any common factors. So before we try using like, oh, that's that hard rule, always look to see if they have any factors in common. And 14 is 7 times 2. 49 is 7 times 7. And 28 is 7 times 4. So you can factor out a 7. Okay, now, can we do something with this? Okay, so the leading term is 2, so I know I'm going to need that. And then I have negative 4. Okay, how could you get negative 4? Well, you could have negative 1 and positive 4. You could have 1 and negative 4. Or you could have negative 4 and 1. Or you could have 4 and negative 1. Or you could have 2 and negative 2. Or you could have negative 2 and 2. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is I want a pairing where the outside product plus the inside product is going to give me negative 7. Okay. 4 plus negative 2 is going to be 2. It's not going to be negative 7, so that doesn't work. Negative 4 plus 2 is not going to be negative 7. 1 minus 8 is negative 7. I found a pairing that works. If you find a pairing that works, then you can factor it. So 1 and 2 and negative 4 and 1. Okay. So this will factor, so I'm just covering up that 7 for now, as 1 times x and 2 times x here, and then minus 4 and plus 1. And then now put the 7 out the front. Okay, so that's going to be the answer we're looking for. Now the order might be different, so they might put these differently. Okay, either one of those is fine. Either one of those two is fine. So let's see what happens. Okay, we got the 7 out the front. Okay, that last one is matching this one. Okay, that's the one I want. Okay. All right, solve the inequality. Okay, so okay. All right, so let's solve that inequality. Okay. So I want to get x on the on the left-hand side and everything else on the right-hand side. So let's add 6 to both sides. Adding does not change the direction of the arrow. So that goes away. And I'm going to have 6x and minus 4 here. Okay. And now I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. Subtracting does not change the direction of the arrow. And 7x minus 6x is x. So x is greater than negative 4. Now, in interval terms, that's equal to that. That's the answer in interval form. On the number line, you'd have negative 4 here. You would not include it because it's strictly greater than. Sometimes it's written with that parenthesis. Okay, so let's see what they've got. Which one matches that? Okay. All right. Oh, I didn't write that correct. 7x minus 4. I wrote it with the minus 6. Okay. Let's try that again. 7x minus 4. Okay. All right. My bad. Let's try that again. Okay. So let's add 4 to both sides. And that'll be minus 6. And then let's subtract 6x from both sides. So you need to write the problem down correctly to begin with. 7x minus 6x is x, and I have x is greater than negative 6. Okay. So on the number line, we find negative 6, and we want the arrows pointing to the right, everything bigger than it. Or sometimes, and in interval form, it's like that. Sometimes instead of just drawing it hollowed out like that, it's drawn with a parenthesis. Okay, now let's check. Okay, so this is the answer that we want. Okay, so we can see how that was drawn. Okay, yeah. So got to copy it down correctly in the first place. Okay. All right, we want to solve that inequality. Okay. Now let's really be careful to copy it down correctly. Okay, so we have, might do it like this, negative 6 times 3x plus 9 is less than negative 24x and minus 18. Okay, make sure I'm doing that correctly. Okay. So I'm going to multiply the negative 6 through, and that's going to give me minus 54. Okay, let's add 24x to both sides. Okay, so negative 18 plus 24 is the same thing as 24 minus 18, which will be positive 6. So negative 18x plus 24x is 6x. Okay. And then let's add 54 to both sides. And so negative 18 plus 54 is the same thing as 54 minus 18, which is going to give us 36. And then I need to solve this for x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6. Dividing by a positive does not change the direction of the arrow. So I have x is strictly less than 6. So on the number line, you would find the 6, and it would be everything to the left of 6 where the arrow is going. 6 is not included. It's strictly less than 6. So it might be written with a parenthesis as well. But I prefer that way, but it looks like the selections are written that way. Okay, so I want, and in an interval formula, that's going to be negative infinity up to, but not including 6. Okay. So it's going to be this first one here. Okay, let me check that. Okay, now we want to solve that one. So I need to write it down correctly. So I'm going to have negative 16 is less than or equal to negative 4x plus 4 is strictly less than negative 12. Okay. So the goal here, make sure I wrote it down correctly. The goal here is to get x by itself in the middle. Okay. Well, to get x by itself in the middle, the first thing I'm going to have to do is to subtract 4. But I have to do that to each part. Subtracting does not change the direction of the arrow. Okay, so I'm going to have negative 20 there. Goes away. And here I'm going to have minus 16. Now, the next thing I need to do to get x by itself is to divide everything by negative 4. Now, negative 4 is going to be doing an arrow flip. Now, if you only have one arrow, it's very simple. You just flip the arrow. Okay. If you have multiple arrows like this, what you're going to have to do is picture that you've got a see-through thing like this, and you're actually going to be flipping it like that. Okay, so if I divide everything by negative 4, okay, we are going to get an arrow flip. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. Okay, so watch very carefully. When you divide by something negative, the arrow flips. So this is going to give me positive 5. The arrow flips. And I have x. I'm left with x. The arrow flips. And I have positive 4. Now, you cannot write intervals with the bigger number coming first. This is not an interval. And if you write that down, it's a wrong answer. So to write the interval, what you probably need to do first is, what does this look like on the number line? X is between 5 and 4. It can be 5, but it's not allowed to be 4. So where is this on the number line? Well, here's 4, and there's 5. Okay. Now, I'm going to draw where this is. X is somewhere in between here. We're going to start at 4. It's not allowed to be 4. It can be anything between 4 and 5. And as you can see from this symbol, it is allowed to be 5. Now, when you write up the answer in interval form, you must write it with the smaller number first. Otherwise, it's not an interval. So, going from left to right, I start at, but I do not include 4. And I go all the way up to, but I do include 5. Okay, so make no mistake, this is not an interval. If you write that, it's wrong. Okay. This is what our answer is in interval form. Okay, so let's go back here, and that's matching up with this one here. Okay. All right. Go back up. All right, so we did that one. All right, we're almost at the end. Use the quadratic formula to solve that. Okay. So what are the zeros? Okay. So what are the zeros? So what values of x, if you plug in here, will make this equal to 0? That's what we're going to find. Use the quadratic formula. Okay, if I use the quadratic formula, a is going to be 7, b is going to be -2, and c is going to be -9. And so the solutions to this, the zeros, are going to be x is equal to -b. So -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. Okay, so we're going to have x is equal to, that's going to be +2 plus or minus the square root of, that's going to be 4. And these two negative signs cancel each other out. So I'm going to have 4 times 7, which is 28. And then times 9, which is 252. All divided by 14. And the square root of 256, let's hope it's nice. It is. So I have two possibilities. One is if I use the plus sign. And the other is if I use the negative sign. So this will give me 18 over 14. And 18 is 9 times 2. 14 is 7 times 2, so that's going to be 9 halves. 9 sevenths. If you can't reduce it by hand, do 18 divided by 14, enter, and then do math, enter, enter, and it gives you to it in lowest form. So 9/7, and then I'll have negative 14 over 14, which will be negative 1. Okay, so 9/7 and negative 1. Those are my zeros. So what do I mean by zeros? Well, if x is equal to negative 1, plug it into here, and it'll give you the number 0. So negative 1 is a 0. That's what it means to be a 0. Also, 9/7 is a 0. If x is 9/7 and you plug it into this formula, you get 0. That's where it comes from. Okay, so this is the answer. Claim that's the answer. So 9/7 and negative 1. Okay, that's what we say it is. Okay. Yeah. Rewrite and then use the quadratic formula to solve the equation. Okay. So the quadratic formula, it's not in the form to solve it. So, and it's using an n. Okay. So for a quadratic to be used, it has to be equal to 0. So we're going to have to add 10n to both sides, and we're going to have to add 7 to both sides. Now I can use the quadratic formula to solve this. What are the zeros? What values of n will make that formula equal to 0? Well, a is going to be 2, b is going to be 10, and c is going to be 7. So the zeros of this are going to be n is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So my solutions are going to be negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus 8 times 7 is 56 over 4. 100 minus 56 is 64. 64, I believe, is a perfect square. Oh, it's 44. Okay, not 64. 44. Okay, got ahead of myself. Okay, so just checking the discriminant in there, double checked it. 44 is not a perfect square. Now, I can't leave it like that because 44 can be simplified. How do you simplify 44? 44 is not a perfect square. Is it a product of something that's a perfect square? Well, yes. I can write it as 4 times 11. So that's going to give me that. Okay. Okay, so then I can factor out a 2. And so with cancellation there, I'll have that. So I'm thinking all simplified. I'll have 2 solutions. One's going to be if I use the plus number, plus symbol, and the other's going to be if I use the minus symbol. All right, so if I haven't made a mistake, then that's what it's going to be. Okay. All right. That is very tricky, wasn't it? Okay, looks like it's that last one. Okay. All right. So that concludes this. Oh, okay. It was a preview and I don't want to grade it. But that concludes this solution video. So if you have any questions about your particular test, just send me an email.